Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And tonight we're going to start out with our feature, Helmut Kohl, who died recently at the age of 87. And Helmut Kohl was one of the most important leaders in the world after World War II. He was the Chancellor of Germany from 1982 to 1998, and he's the man who oversaw the reunification of Germany after East Germany collapsed. He was born in 1930, right before Hitler took power in Germany, and ironically, he was made a Hitler Youth by the SS at Berchtesgaden, Hitler's redoubt, 10 days before the end of the war. Every German youth was expected to defend Germany to the death, and he and a bunch of his friends said, no more of that for us. They took off on foot, and that was pretty much the end of their war experience, and he went into politics. Here's the French news agency on the death of Helmut Kohl.
One of Europe's key post-war political figures, Helmut Kohl was the leader who reunited Germany and placed the country at the heart of a new Europe. A devout Catholic, he graduated in law and politics before going on to become leader of the Christian Democratic Union in 1973, at the age of 43. Just 10 years later, he had risen to the top of his country's political ranks.
His biggest dream, I think, was to become Chancellor. It's something that he always obsessed over, but for all that, there was no radical turn towards conservatism. That was his strength. He succeeded in changing the government, whilst maintaining continuity.
It was following his first election victory that he took the hand of French President François Mitterrand at a remembrance ceremony in Verdun. The moment came to symbolize a rebuilding of the Franco-German friendship that had been fractured by the two world wars. That friendship was to become the cornerstone of further European integration, opening the way for the creation of a single European market. Kohl was also a committed advocate of the single currency. Throughout his time in office, he was often ridiculed for his provincial accent and tastes, and yet he proved his mettle in 1989 after the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Well, that's where we turn it over to CNN to discuss Kohl's role in the German reunification.
November 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the beginning of the end of the Cold War. West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl basks in the limelight. But behind the scenes, there was suspense.
The night after the fall of the wall was the most decisive moment.
It was a make-or-break moment. How would the Soviets react? Helmut Kohl says he and then U.S. President George H.W. Bush assured Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that Soviet forces based in the East would not be attacked.
Gorbachev trusted our words and decided not to send in the tanks.
Conservative Chancellor Helmut Kohl peacefully shepherded the two Germanys to unity and was hailed as the father of reunification. But the excitement of the moment wore off. The economy in the former communist East was in disarray. Many former communist companies were shut down. There was mass unemployment and mass discontent. Kohl had promised the East would flourish, but after 16 years and 3 terms in office, the German public was no longer convinced of his efforts on the economy, and he was finally voted out. His tenure was full of other hard-fought and often controversial accomplishments. When he came to power in 1982, he supported the stationing of U.S. medium-range nuclear missiles in Germany, a response to Soviet SS-20 missiles in Eastern Europe. Kohl faced down fierce protest over the policy which supporters say helped win the Cold War. Others say Germany's so-called Ostpolitik, which sought to ensure closer ties with Moscow, did more to tear down the Iron Curtain.
My strategy was to do everything possible to keep the idea of a unified Germany alive.
His political thinking from the start was defined by the horrors of World War II. He'd lost his brother on the battlefields of France and was determined it must never happen again.
When Gorbachev visited, we sat along the Rhine River one evening and talked about our personal experiences in World War II. His father was seriously injured. His brother was shot. I lived through more than 100 raids in my hometown. We both knew what we were talking about when it came to war.
In 1984, he and then French President François Mitterrand agreed to meet on the First World War's bloodiest battlefield, Verdun. Their handshake, the most powerful image of Franco-German reconciliation.
We held hands as an example. We wanted never again to go back.
After the wall came down, the two leaders joined hands once again as the driving force behind a growing European Union with a single currency. Architects of the Maastricht Treaty, which critics today say they rushed into. But after Kohl left office in 1998, his image was seriously damaged. His party was involved in a campaign donations fraud scandal, and the former chancellor admitted he had known about it. Still, Kohl refused to say where the illegal money came from, a move many Germans viewed as a disgrace. And there were personal tragedies. In 2001, Kohl's wife, Hannelore, took her own life. She'd been suffering from a rare allergy to light. Then in 2008, Kohl remarried the 44-year-old economist Maike Richter. Not long after, a bad fall confined him to a wheelchair, difficult years in which he withdrew further and further from the public light. Now that the world looks back on the life of Helmut Kohl, he will be remembered as the father of German reunification and the country's longest-serving post-war chancellor.
Well, if you're interested in more details about the fall of the Berlin Wall, I urge you to listen to our podcast on Günter Schabowski. He was the East German official who unwittingly had a large role in the wall coming down. Well, we're going to give the final word on Helmut Kohl to Angela Merkel, who is the most powerful person in Europe. She's the first female chancellor of Germany. She grew up in East Germany, by the way, and she called for Kohl's resignation during the slush fund scandal, but she had some nice words for him at his death.
Helmut Kohl hat auch mein Lebensweg.
Helmut Kohl changed my life. Like millions of other people, I could escape the life of dictatorship of the GDR into a life of freedom. I could start living without fear of constant observation. Everything that followed in the 27 years since then would not have been possible without Helmut Kohl. Personally, I'm very grateful that he existed.
I gotta tell you, I don't think those two ever really buried the hatchet. And there was a little controversy at his funeral. We're gonna move on now to John Avildsen, who died recently at the age of 81. He was a local boy born in the neighborhood of broad lawns and narrow mines of Oak Park. As another Oak Park expatriate, Ernest Hemingway, is reported to have described it. And John Avildsen went on to become one of the most successful directors in Hollywood. Most notably, even though he hated boxing, he won the 1977 Academy Award for Best Director for Rocky. He beat out some pretty good films and some pretty good directors that year. Here's the awarding by the French actress Jeanne Moreau.
The nominees for the Directing Award are Alan J. Pakula, or The President's Man, Ingmar Bergman, Face to Face, Sidney Lumet, Network, John G. Avildsen, Rocky, Lina Wertmuller, Seven Beauties, and the winner is John G. Avildsen for Rocky.
Oh my goodness. I guess what Rocky did was give a lot of people hope, and there was never a better feeling than doing that. And I had a lot of people who gave me things. Sylvester Stallone gave me his guts and his heart and his best shot. Thank you.
Those of you who listen to this podcast regularly know I'm not the biggest Rocky fan in the world, but hey, what do I know? John Avildsen also did some other notable movies. He sort of specialized in underdog movies, and probably the most important after Rocky was The Karate Kid. Here's part of the best scene in that movie with Pat Morita, Mr. Miyagi, getting drunk. I love Pat Morita. He's a very funny guy if you've ever seen him in The Odd Couple. And this helped win him an Academy Award nomination.
I didn't know you were a singer. How you doing, Miss Mary?
Oy, Daniel-san. Coming back.
What's that song you were singing there?
Japanese blues. Coming back.
Come by.
Yai-sama tane shinro shimpo banzai.
The baby trees.
Banzai. Banzai.
Banzai.
Banzai.
Banzai.
Close.
Here's Pat Morita talking about how he got the role.
The big guy, Jerry Weintraub, didn't want me for this. He wouldn't even consider me for a reading. Every time my name came up in the casting submittal process, he was adamant. He says, I don't want a comedian. I don't want a comic actor for this role. This is a heavyweight part. I want an actor. In all of America, there's got to be some kind of an actor. Go find him. You know? And I love to share the story of my first time meeting with John Avildsen. I walk in and I meet a half a man. He's got a camera on this side and a battery pack from here over. And this side's talking to me. He's looking at me. He's, hi, Pat. John Avildsen. Nice to meet you. Would you like to sit down and tell me a little bit? So he's taping this thing. We talk. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I tell him about myself. Would you like to read? Yeah, a couple of pages to read. Just working off the top of my head, improvising virtually. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you, etc., etc. And as I leave, he says, Pat, don't you want to take your script with you? You might need it. That's the first little teeny tiny glimpse of maybe I got a shot at something. And during the process, John reaches over and clicks on the monitor. Mega Mogul Jerry, starts talking about all the business, and he looks over and he goes, hey, wait a minute. That's a Miyagi. That looks like a Miyagi. Who the hell is that actor? And John says, that's the Pat Morita you refused to read for this part. To Jerry's credit, he gets on the horn and says, Pat, I almost made the worst mistake of my life. I just want to be the first to congratulate you. You got the part of Miyagi. So that's why Miyagi talk like this, because he ran out of energy.
Pat Morita was the best thing about that movie. Just want to mention one other thing about John Avildsen. One of his first movies was a 1970 movie called Joe, starring Peter Boyle. One of Peter Boyle's first roles after Second City, and he is magnificent. One of the great screen performances you'll ever see. He plays a hard-hat construction worker who hates hippies, and the role not only put Peter Boyle on the map, but it may have been the model for Carol O'Connor's Archie Bunker for All in the Family, which debuted the next year.
You gonna shoot me? Well, where's that going to get? You want to shoot somebody, shoot them.
If you ever get a chance, catch Joe, directed by John Avildsen. And we're going to close tonight with Stephen Furstein, a.k.a. Stephen Furst, who died recently at the age of 62. But you may know him better as Kent Dorfman, a.k.a. Flounder, one of the seminal characters in one of the groundbreaking movies of the 1970s, Animal House. He played the biggest nerd in the Delta House. In one scene, everybody's throwing beer cans at his image on a screen. Got the role, by the way, when he was a pizza delivery boy in Hollywood, and he put his resume in all his pizza boxes. And Matty Simmons, who was the really rich guy who produced Animal House and a lot of other comedies, decided to give him a look, and he did great. He's best known for two lines in the movie, one he delivers and one about him. The line he delivers is during the ill-fated parade down Main Street at the end of the movie where the Deltas have decided to sabotage the entire operation.
Oh boy, is this great!
He played an instrumental role in that sabotage, by the way, by purchasing 10,000 marbles from a local convenience store, which he then tossed all over the street, causing havoc. Piece of trivia, the girl he purchased the marbles from at the cash register was his real-life wife, Lorraine, in a cameo.
May I have 10,000 marbles, please?
But as I said, he's famous for one other line that was said about him. Flounder was always being abused by somebody, whether it was John Belushi from his own frat, or whether it was Douglas Niedermeyer and Greg Marmalade from the fascist frat that was trying to get rid of the Deltas. But the worst abuse he got was one of the most famous lines in movies, delivered by Dean Vernon Wormer, a.k.a. John Vernon, when Flounder and his reprobate fraternity brothers are in the dean's office at Faber College.
Mr. Dorfman.
Hello.
0.2. Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
As I said, one of the most famous lines in movies. Well, we're going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. Stephen Furst did a couple of other roles. He was a regular on Babylon 5, the 1990 science fiction series. But my favorite role of his, other than Flounder, was from the great hospital comedy drama television series of the 1980s, St. Elsewhere, which started so many careers, including Denzel Washington, Howie Mandel, and Mark Harmon. Stephen Furst played Dr. Elliot Axelrod on St. Elsewhere. It also had one of the great and most instantly recognizable television themes of the era. So as a final tribute to Stephen Furst, and for my wife who really loves this theme, here's a little bit of the theme from St. Elsewhere.